For some reason, my friends don't think I could beat a kangaroo in a fight, and to prove them wrong, I'm not willing to endure the animal cruelty allegations, or, frankly, enter Australia. So we're going to do the next best thing, and use the very realistic, extremely scientific combat simulation that is the Pokémon battle system. Now, one small problem with this is that I'm not a Pokémon. And we don't know my Pokémon stats, but we can figure those out, right? I mean, how hard could it be? Alright, let's get down to business.
First, we need to figure out the stats of an average human, and then we can worry about me in particular. You might think this would be an extremely easy task because humans can't, for example, withstand fires at heats rivaling the surface temperature of the sun, which for some reason Magcargo can produce, and we must therefore all have stats sitting around the 0 mark. But I am here to tell you that you are wrong. Yes, the Pokédex tells us that some Pokémon are capable of apocalyptic feats as part of their everyday function, and MatPat game theory would have you believe that the Pokémon world is doomed to end every second it exists, but anyone with eyes can tell you that it clearly hasn't.
Now, I wouldn't be breaking new ground to imply that the Pokédex is prone to severe and fantastical exaggerations sometimes.
However, I think it's very important to point to certain entries and say, yeah, okay, I get it, Rapidash can jump high. Probably not actually that high, but pretty high.
Side note, but I think my absolute favourite Pokédex exaggeration has got to be the entry on Palafin, in which it claims it can lift an entire cruise ship with one fin. And no, it can't. It can't do that. I am confident it cannot. It really just can't do that.
This is all to say, even if the Pokédex gives us specific measurements for just how powerful these Pokémon are in Fahrenheit, even if for some reason you choose to take them at face value, there's no reason to believe the Pokémon world concept of Fahrenheit matches our temperature scale at all.
We actually know they're not the same because, and I can't stress this enough, the Pokémon world is not a constant blazing hellfire. Ergo, vis-a-vis therefore, Pokémon are not gods, and if they're not gods, then they can bleed. And if they can bleed, I can beat a kangaroo in a fight.
Now, you might have noticed that this stance we've taken on Pokédex, that it's probably more or less fairly useful for establishing what a Pokémon is generally good at, but otherwise completely useless at establishing a basis in our reality, puts us in an awkward spot. How are we even going to find appropriate analogues between real-life humans and Pokémon?
The good news is that we can still probably maybe figure it out with the rest of the information the games give us. Bad news. There's no bad. I didn't say anything about bad news out loud. Now, one more thing that I need to bring up here is that I am not interested in vibes-based speculation. I am a scientist. We are doing science. I want empirical evidence. I want quantitative data. This is a very serious video for very serious people. Now let's go fight this kangaroo.
Okay, let's get started with one of the easier ones, speed. First thing we need to establish is what speed actually is. That's capital S speed, the stat, not what the word speed means. Because they're different things, I swear. Just stay with me on this one for a second. In Pokemon, the speed stat determines which Pokemon move before others. It doesn't inform things like movement speed, because that doesn't exist in the context of a Pokemon battle. This implies that in the context of real life, the higher the speed stat, the less time it takes from when a command is given to when the attack is actually landed. And this makes a lot of sense actually, because it explains why a Pokemon like Escavalier, with an abysmal speed stat of 20, apparently can fly around at high speeds according to the Pokédex.
Sure, its max speed is high, but its reaction time is like that of a rock. And this can also help explain memes like this one, because yeah, I guess the cow just has really good reflexes. I don't know what to tell you.
This also tracks in real life because, generally speaking, the bigger the animal, the slower its reaction time, because bigger brains have more work to do to take in a stimulus, determine what to do with it, and then send the correct signals to the body. This brings us on to the question of how we find out what a human speed stat would be. If you take a look at the range of speed stats across all Pokemon, it's pretty clear that Pokemon based on animals with good reaction times, like cats, snakes, and bugs, have great speed stats.
Therefore, we could make the assumption that the range of all speeds across all Pokemon matches the range of all reaction times across all animals. This is not a correlation fallacy. Do not think about it too hard.
If we ignore Regieleki, which is not only a complete outlier, but also an abomination clearly not born from nature, the base speed stats range from 5, with Pokemon like Shuckle and Pyukumuku, all the way to Ninjask at 160. To my knowledge, the animal with the slowest response time is the elephant, with about a 250 millisecond reaction time. And the fastest are among very small insects like flies, at about 5 milliseconds. Humans unfortunately sit on the slower end of the scale at about 160 milliseconds. Side note, obviously these numbers vary significantly based on what the stimulus is and how it's being measured, but just go with me on this one, okay? So with a reaction time of 160 milliseconds, that puts humans in the lowest third of possible speeds, landing roughly at a speed of 53.
Huh. That's not very good, is it? But speed isn't everything. Incineroar has only like a speed of 60 and he's still viable. I mean, let's move on to, I bet our attack is good. Let's move on to attack next. Hello and welcome to the attack stat zone. Now, you might have noticed that we can't actually do any Pokemon attacks, nor can we lift things ranging from trucks to cruise liners. But I'm here to tell you that that is okay. I have more conjecture, more information from the Pokedex that can help us out here.
See here this line about Hatterene and knocking out boxers? Apparently, it's really strong, even though its attack stat looks like this. Now bear with me here, this implies that the attack stat is not derived entirely from the physical strength of the Pokemon. What? No, it has nothing to do with game balance, don't be ridiculous. Obviously, physical strength is a factor, but if some Pokemon can be strong as hell with a bad attack stat, that tells us that the attack stat is really just a measure of how good the Pokemon is at using physical moves generally. There's a correlation between strength and attack, but not a causation. This brings me on to my next point, which is that you still might think our attack must be like 0, because we tend to not be able to smash through rocks or push massive boulders around, for example. And while that is technically true, I believe that if we could learn Rock Smash, we could actually smash a rock with it, because the property of blowing up a rock is a property of the move and not the Pokemon itself.
We know this because Chansey, the Pokemon with the lowest attack in the game, can use Rock Smash, which means it's not a question of how strong you are, it's a question of do you have the latent magical power to use the technique that will let you blow up the rock.
This is further backed up by the fact that unless your Infernape knows strength, no matter what you do, your level 100 Choice Banded Monkey with 7,000 attack is not getting through this Victory Road puzzle. This is my very long-winded way of saying we need to find a way to compare Pokemon attack with human athleticism in a way that doesn't involve using any moves whatsoever. We need to find something that correlates with a Pokemon's attack that we can also compare to a similar property in humans. And here's how we're going to do it. Enter the Pokeathlon. The Pokeathlon is a series of minigames in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where your Pokemon compete in various sports that use several different unique stats: skill, power, speed, stamina, and jump. You might expect these stats to correlate somewhat with the Pokemon's actual stats, and you'd be right. Kind of. Let's take a look at power and see if it correlates to attack. Just have to extract the raw data from Wikipedia, run it through a Python script, and place it in a CSV file along with the stats, put that CSV file into sheets and make a simple plot graph, and finally generate a trend line, and voila! Proof that power correlates to attack.
The correlation, which you can see from this R² value, is very, very strong. For those of you who know nothing about statistics, just know that an R value tells us how strong a correlation is between two data points on a scale of 0 to 0.4. I swear. For those of you who do know what an R² value is, keep quiet if you know it's good for you.
So, where am I going with this, now that I've proven beyond all reasonable doubt that power correlates to attack? Well, the Pokéathlon game we're interested in is the Block Smash game, where Pokemon break concrete blocks to win points. Several of the Pokéathlon stats affect different aspects of this minigame, but what we're interested in is how many blocks you can break in one hit, which is of course affected by power.
The human world record for breaking the most unspaced concrete blocks in one hit is 4. Paul Hickey, you are my hero. You are my hero because the most a Pokemon can break in the Pokéathlon is also 4. Only if they have a power of 5, making our human power also 5. This is the first bit of good news we've had all day.
Now that we're confident that humans would have a power stat of 5, we have to convert that back into an attack stat. Now, do you remember a second ago when I said that the R value is a measure of how strong the correlation is between two data points? Well, that is true, but I was lying about how good a 0.325 is. It's really a scale between 0 and 1, and while 0.325 implies some weak to medium correlation, we probably shouldn't just use the intersection of the trend line to determine our attack stat. And you can put the comment down. 0.325 is a good R value for like zoology. We're not all engineers and physicists here, okay? So what we're going to do is add up the attack of all 5-power Pokemon and divide by the total number to get the average attack of a 5-power Pokemon, and then use that, which gives us an attack of 97.
That's not unusably low. I mean, it's 2 more than Kangaskhan has at least. All right, let's really hope our defense is a little higher than average, because we kind of need the win at this point. Okay, welcome to the defense corner. I have no idea what we're going to do for this one, so let's move on to HP, and then we can come back here once we've done that, and we can extrapolate defense using attack and HP. Sound good? All right, let's go do HP.
Real quick, if you've gotten this far in the video, you clearly either enjoy the content or are hate watching. So either way, it makes sense to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Trust me, it helps me out more than you'd think. Or if you're hate watching, it really, really negatively impacts me. So please, please don't. Oh no. Anyway, hope you're enjoying this nonsense so far. Let's get back to it. Okay, HP time. This one's a little trickier. There's no real correlation with any Pokéathlon stats. There's kind of a correlation with HP and weight, but if our previous graph was pushing it, this one is not any better. So we need some other way to figure things out. What we really need is some way to put the HP stat into perspective. Most moves Pokemon use are affected by the attacker's attack stat, the defender's defense stat, and the move power itself. So trying to extrapolate anything with that many variables is next to impossible. What we need is some way to deal a fixed, invariable amount of damage that also has some sort of analog in the real world. Luckily for us, we have exactly that, the move Sonic Boom. According to the move description, this move fires off a destructive shockwave that always deals exactly 20 damage. This is fascinating to me because shockwaves famously have massive variance in how much damage they can deal to organic tissue based on their intensity and the distance from the origin point.
So I guess anytime any Pokemon ever uses Sonic Boom, they're always generating the exact same amount of overpressure and standing the exact same distance away from the target every single time. Otherwise, this move really just makes no sense. And I know for a fact Game Freak cares about the scientific integrity of their battle simulation as much as I do, so this must be the case, right?
Anyway, we need to figure out exactly how much overpressure the shockwave from Sonic Boom can produce. Once we know that, we simply need to find out roughly how much overpressure a human can withstand from a shockwave, and we can go from there. One problem with this though is that Pokemon can tank more Sonic Booms regardless of their defense the higher their level, since your HP stat also scales with level. Here's my solution. Wild Pokemon in most locations in most games average out at a level between 30 and 40, and those who scale higher tend to subside in particularly volatile areas, where it would make sense that they would have to become stronger to survive. On top of this, most Pokemon reach their final evolutions around level 35. This implies that a healthy, fully grown Pokemon that is nevertheless wild and untrained in combat is, on average, level 35, and animals in our world are also sitting around that mark, including humans. Now, this is useful to us because, similar to speed, we can roughly estimate the HP stats of animals by comparing them to their in-game counterparts. Only thing we need now is some data on the impact of shockwaves on animals.
Now, obviously, I'm not about to start experimenting with the shockwaves from TNT blasts and measuring the soft tissue damage done to animals, because someone already has.
Jokes aside here, just a quick content warning for animal testing. I'm not going into massive gory detail, but if you're upset by this kind of thing, there's absolutely no shame, you can skip to this timestamp now. Here's a paper from Nature titled Simulation of Blast Lung Injury Induced by Shockwaves of 5 Distances Based on Finite Element Modeling of a 3-Dimensional Rat. The long and short of it is that the study wanted to determine the effectiveness of a piece of software that could model lung injuries from shockwave blasts at multiple distances by performing an experiment in real life as well as in their simulation to compare results. They anesthetized 5 rats and placed them at 5 distances in intervals of 10 centimeters from 10 grams of detonating TNT, then performed autopsies to measure the impact. Now, we don't really care about the simulation. What's far more interesting to us is the lung cross-sections from each of the rats. We can estimate by eye that at about 60 centimeters away, the damage to the lungs is about a third as bad as the damage the paper describes as severe from the 2 closest rats. And therefore, we can estimate that a rat can maybe withstand at most 3 blasts of this 60 centimeter distance overpressure before taking damage considered severe. Why do we care about this? Because this lines up with the proportion of damage a level 35 Rattata takes from a sonic boom. With an average HP stat around the 60 mark, Rattata can take 3 sonic booms, which tells us that the overpressure at the 60 centimeter mark is equivalent to that of the overpressure from a sonic boom. According to the study, at 60 centimeters, the maximum pressure simulated in the lungs was about 5.5 kilopascals. If we take a look at this table I found, humans experiencing 3 psi, or 21 kilopascals of overpressure, experience serious injuries, and any higher results in fatalities. I think this is that point where you would consider a Pokemon fainted, where their HP reaches 0, or when you could consider the damage severe.
Now, assuming that experiencing 5.5 kilopascals of overpressure 4 times is the same as experiencing 22 kilopascals of overpressure once, which must be the case because that's how that works in the very accurate to real life Pokemon battles, we can see that humans have 33% more HP than rats. Therefore, using Rattata as a base, we can see that our HP stat is equal to 40? But that's fine, that's okay, because we're gonna have a whopper defense stat. Let's move on really quickly to defense.
So at least now we should be able to figure out our defense. Please, God, be a good defense. We need this to be a good defense. Here's what the in-game damage formula looks like, and here's what it looks like with everything we don't need removed. As you can see, we have everything we need to solve for D except for the expected damage. If we can find out, on average, how many hits it takes for a human to knock out another human, we can divide that number by our average HP stat at level 35 to get the damage total from one attack. We're assuming here that all attacks have 40 base power, because that just seems to be the in-game number for a standard, not particularly magical or powerful move. Unfortunately, despite my best googling, there doesn't seem to be a clean answer for average number of landed headshots for a knockout in boxing, which initially I thought made sense, because real life isn't like a video game. But then I remembered, actually real life is exactly like a video game. Pokémon, that's the whole point of this video. Good thing too, because if things weren't so simple and straightforward, this video would have been hell to make. So no, while seemingly no one has answered the question of the average number of hits per knockout, I'll simply have to answer it myself. And while boxing as a sport doesn't seem to have exceptionally good datasets for what I'm looking for, as it turns out, UFC fans are absolute nerds and keep track of everything. This dataset will tell us which matches end in KOs or TKOs and the number of hits landed by each fighter. All we have to do is write a script that can pick out from each fight who the winner is, if the fight ends in a KO, and if it does, add the number of hits landed by the winner, then do that for every fight ever recorded, then divide the total number of hits by the total number of KOs. Luckily, I am a computer scientist and I shouldn't struggle too much to get this working.
6.5 hours later.
Finally, Jesus Christ, okay. So, According to my calculations, in MMA, a KO or TKO happens on average after landing 25 significant shots to the head in one round. Now, that sounds like a lot, frankly, but I take it up with the dataset, not me.
This, of course, means that on average, between two humans, each hit does about 4%. Assuming every hit is to the head. Okay, as much as I would love to use this as justification for humans having like a bajillion defense, I think it would be disingenuous to imply that from a trained fighter, an attack would consist of one single punch.
Okay, maybe it would be better to use a move like Close Combat as a guide, which, if you count the animation in Gen 4, has 8 separate punches. Okay, that's more reasonable. 8 punches equals 1 attack. I still think the power should be 40 though. We're not throwing out moves with the equivalent power of tidal waves or earthquakes in a UFC cage fight. Alright, now we know that roughly 4 attacks equals a feint. We just need to find out what the average level 35 person's HP is now, and we can use Mr. Mime as a base for this since he also has 40 base HP. Very suspiciously similar, now that I think about it. Anyway, this gives us roughly 80 HP on average. I could try to find a UFC fighter's level and use that instead, but I really have enough on my plate right now, so let's just assume it scales linearly. Why not? We've assumed literally everything else under the sun at this point.
Alright, so now we just need to take our damage formula, rearrange it to solve for D, then convert it back into a base stat, which gives us a clean defense stat of 42. Are you joking? What? But you know what? It doesn't matter. Let's move on to the special attack, because that's all you need. All you need is a good special attack. If we have that, we're fine. It is so vital we have a good special attack that I actually gave this job to my intern. So let's give him a call and see how he's doing, okay? Yeah? Uh-huh. Okay, yeah, to shreds you say. Okay, great, okay. Yeah, he killed himself. All right, special defense time, guys. And I'm coming up with a blank. I've got nothing. I can't think of a single. I've pulled so much shite out of my ass for the past 20 minutes, and I've got nothing. I can't think of a single way to justify a human special defense stat. The best I can do is look at all Pokemon stats and find the ones that are the most statistically similar to ours. And looking at all Pokemon, the two that stand out as having the most similar stat distributions are Trapinch and Larvesta.
Now, I'm not really sure how I feel about this information, but it's not good. Either way, with special defense stats of 45 and 55, I guess we'll just split the difference and call it a clean 50 for our special defense.
Well, I won't lie. It's not looking good for me in the simulation. But we have one more thing to do, which is to find out my specific IVs and EVs.
This is to say, we're going to find out how much stronger or weaker I am than the average person. Now, through a series of extremely scientific, top-secret trials, which I cannot go into detail about, but do involve a reaction time test and a punching bag arcade machine, I can tell you that my final stat totals look like this. As you can see, only my attack and speed are different from the average, since I can only measure my defense by getting knocked out in a cage fight, my HP by taking near fatal wounds from an explosion, and do not get me started on the special stats. All we need to do now is match me up against the most kangaroo Kangaskhan we can manage, which looks like this. Now, let's get into the simulation. What do you mean it's over already? You know, with a little bit of prep work, I think I could improve my reaction time to get it to, the highest a human possibly can have it, which does give me exactly 1 more speed than the average Kangaskhan. Let's try that again, and yeah, okay, still didn't really matter. Okay. I think humans are probably normal type. Let's give me stab, and you know what? I'm a pretty adamant person. I think people could describe my nature as adamant. Okay, surely now? No, okay then. Alright, I didn't want it to come to this, but I have been holding out on you guys. I actually know how to use the move Close Combat. So surely now... Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Okay, fine. Maybe I can't beat a kangaroo in a fight. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed something a little different than usual. As always, thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon, especially at least 8 million ants, Chaos Lord Drago, Hi When Are We Getting Luck versus the Cardmaker team and Canlander, signed the single Magic the Gathering fan in your audience, Sean Colgan, and Zed the Man, as well as a real world scientist, at Cardillo, a magic user, Avery Bun, Frostfuck, Peter Clare Lomax, Squarka, Sparkfire, The Dirtman, and Where is Spacebar, as well as everyone else you see here. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.